Hi, I'm Martin Curtis, and this is Change from the Centre. About 2 years ago, we had the last general election, and we all know what the outcome was. Totally predictably, the Conservatives got a good drubbing, and the Labour Party came into power with a huge majority. A couple of things have happened since then. In fact, one major thing has happened, and another one is about to happen. The first major thing was, of course, Reform UK starting to top and consistently topping the polls in the UK. And the second one is the change in Prime Minister that we're about to get. That change in Prime Minister may make a difference to the polls. There are some indications recently that Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister is going to give the Labour Party a bit of a bounce. Whether that leads to a general election is another matter. But the question I want to ask is, how are the Conservatives doing? It is worth repeating for those that don't know that I am a former Conservative Party member. I was a Conservative council leader and I was a Conservative parliamentary candidate. So my heart wants the Conservatives to do well, but they have been so busy following reform down the river to the right that I would argue they lost direction. But there are signs that they might be drifting back slowly but surely. One of those is actually around Kemi Badenoch and her popularity. One of the things I did was a quick comparison between where Kemi Badenoch is now 2 years after a general election and where William Hague was 2 years after Tony Blair's landslide in 1999. And she is very, very popular amongst the public, relatively speaking. There are different polls that give different levels. I've seen one that says her net approval rating is -17. I've seen another one that says it's -4. Now, they may not sound great, but they're streets ahead of William Hague, who was -25. And they're also well ahead of both Farage and of Keir Starmer at the moment. Where they'll be with Andy Burnham is another matter. But that's really important because she's worked hard to get there. She got, within the first year of her coming to power, there was a lot of negative talk about her. There's some examples. So people were chasing Kemi Badenoch at that point and saying she wasn't doing good enough. But actually, people have seen that her appearances on television have been very solid, and her appearances on Prime Minister's Questions, for people that watch it, have got better and better. And she's got more and more confident. And that despite the fact that we've had a Prime Minister getting more and more confident at them as well, although he had the benefit of years of being on the other side of Prime Minister's Questions. So Kemi Badenoch does seem to be doing better. So overall, I think it's easy to say that Kemi Badenoch has made a really good start as the leader of the Conservative Party. But there are a couple of downsides. The first one is there is a case made very often about Kemi Badenoch that she likes an argument. And in fact, in her early days, there was a case made that she could start an argument in an empty room. We haven't really seen a lot of that. Certainly in the last year, there were a few signs earlier on in her leadership. But just about a week ago at Prime Minister's Questions, there was another example of Kemi Badenoch's talent for an argument, where, first of all, she said a few things in Prime Minister's Questions that were unfortunate. And I think the Speaker of the House of Commons said a few things. And it also resulted in this little comment from Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, can I also recognise how difficult it was for the Prime Minister to make the statement he did on Monday? It's an important reminder as we debate issues robustly in this House that we are all human, and it's something that everyone should remember.
Now, I really like that little exchange from Ed Davey. I'm not normally a huge fan of the Liberal Democrats, but actually, I think that was very powerful, actually. And it was a good way of making a point. And for the onlooker, you could see an element of humour in it as well. What I expect from Kemi Badenoch now is for her to reflect on that, not least because after that exchange, there was also a big argument outside of the chamber with Bridget Phillipson, one of the people that she was a bit harsh to, and a couple of Labour MPs are also weighing in. And those sort of things are not needed. I know politics, people are expected and should be expected to a certain extent to rub up against each other, but there's a tone and a manner in which that needs to be done. And what I hope is that Kemi Badenoch does some reflection and learns from it and actually becomes an even better leader as a result of what happened a week ago. The other thing Kemi Badenoch hasn't managed to do is translate her popularity into something that is meaningful for the Conservative Party. This is difficult territory for the Conservative Party. We're in a place where they have never been before, is a reality. Rather than the historic Labour versus Conservative fight, it's now a arguably four-way fight between the Greens, Labour, Conservatives and Reform. And perhaps the Conservatives can hope that the Labour Party will lose votes to the Greens in the same way that they've lost votes to Reform. But it is also true that there are Labour votes that are heading to Reform. And there's a reason for that. There's a lot of people in the red wall areas of this country, as we supposedly like to call them, that are looking for hope from their government. And my view is that as the Conservatives chase Reform to the right, what they actually do is forget that they could create and be its own original policy base in order to try and attract those people back. And I'll talk more about that later on. But there's a reality that it's not really making a difference. But there are signs that people are willing to vote Conservative again when previously it was seen as toxic. The most recent one of those was the by-elections we had on the same day as the Macclesfield by-election. So I'll just show you this graph up. This is just the Conservative vote in those by-elections, and you'll see Macclesfield was dire for the Conservatives, and you sort of understand because it became a Labour stroke Reform UK fight. Arbroath and Broughton Ferry, though, 19% of the vote. At least they kept the deposit. However, what this is showing is that Conservatives are not doing as you would expect at this time of the political cycle. You would expect the Conservatives to be consistently polling 10, 15%. Not getting your deposit back in Macclesfield was, in my view, horrific for the Conservative Party. But sat at the top of that graph is Aberdeen South. And that's where you start to get a little bit of light shone on this. Aberdeen South was unique to a certain extent. And the reason for that was that the Conservatives were able to pick up on the oil agenda and the idea of resurrecting the British oil industry. And they were able to apply that directly to Aberdeen South. So it wasn't people of Aberdeen South looking at the Conservatives' wider policy base and saying, wow, we really like that. It was about the Conservatives fighting basically on a single ticket, which is we will revive the oil industry. We will reopen oil fields. And that attracted a huge amount of support. There's no surprise to a certain extent in that. But it also showed that to the people that voted for them, the Conservative brand wasn't toxic, because if it was still toxic, they would not have received that sort of outcome. And I think that is a real positive. The Conservatives now need to think about a policy base because they don't really have one. If you go to the Conservatives website, they have policies listed on a section of the website. And some of it, like the New Deal, is probably good stuff. But a lot of it is about turning back what the Labour Party have done. A lot of it is anti stuff rather than pro stuff. They don't have a positive agenda. And that, to me, is where they are failing. Now, a lot of Conservatives would say they don't want to do this because at this point in the electoral cycle, their ideas, their good ideas, would be stolen. But surely that's the point. The point of politics is to have your ideas and your thinking brought into legislation. So if they can do something that forces the government's agenda to start following them, A, that'd be good for the country if the policies are right. But B, it would start to put a lesson forwards that actually the Conservatives are the ones that are really, really leading the game. So let me give you an example. They've got a good section in on the New Deal for young people, and it's really good. It talks about school leavers, it's apprenticeships. But there's a reality, which is we have too many children still in too many areas of this country that are leaving education without proper qualifications, but more importantly, to a certain extent, without the real sense of aspiration that they deserve. And we've been following basically the same education pattern for 150 years. And we need to start thinking differently. And we need to start thinking not just how do we leave people and make sure every single child leaves school qualified, but also how do we make sure every single child has the belief that they can have a hugely successful career when they leave. Now that is good conservatism. It's good one nationism, because if you can create that sort of belief, people will innovate and people will drive to make their beliefs happen. And those things drive economies. So that's a bit of it's the sort of original thinking the Conservatives aren't doing. People are increasingly waking up to the fact that the status quo in politics isn't working anymore. But what nobody is offering, and the Conservatives need to in particular, because they're the ones that have got most to gain from it, but nobody is offering anything different to come forward. That's what Change from the Centre is about. And it is about policy as much as it is about fixing our broken political system, which, by the way, the Conservatives have woken up to. I've seen a couple of bits of evidence, one that says we're not Reform UK, another one saying that they need to fix our broken political system. But again, no ideas. So if I was to summarize this video, I would put it this way. As far as a Conservative report card is concerned, I would give Kemi Badenoch probably a B, maybe a B+, and I would give the Conservative Party a C, maybe a C+. But they need to start accelerating now if they are truly, truly to make a difference. And by accelerating, they can also steal a lot of the thunder that Reform have gained so far, because Reform seem to be dwindling at the moment, and their votes are going to go somewhere.